Lightning splintered the obsidian sky over Manhattan, casting a momentary skeletal glow across the sprawling living room of the Thorne penthouse. The thunder that followed was almost loud enough to drown out the sobbing, but not quite. Evelyn Cross stepped out of the private elevator, her Louboutin heels sinking silently into the plush carpet. She didn't carry a weapon. She carried a Hermes Birkin bag filled with industrial-grade solvents, burner phones, and pre-signed non-disclosure agreements. She was the fixer, the woman the elite called when their sins became too messy for prayer. Victoria Thorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, sipping a glass of dark red wine that matched the stain spreading across the white bearskin rug. She didn't turn around when the elevator chimed. Victoria's voice was as cold as the rain lashing against the glass. "You're 4 minutes late." Evelyn checked her platinum Cartier watch, her expression unmoved. "I'm never late." Victoria, "I'm exactly where the money requires me to be. Is the transfer complete?" Victoria turned. Then, her face, a mask of imperious boredom. Despite the carnage at her feet, "Check your offshore account. 5 million. Double the usual rate. Because the mess is substantial." Evelyn walked past the matriarch, her eyes scanning the room with the clinical detachment of a surgeon. The scene was a tableau of horror. A heavy crystal decanter lay shattered, overturned chairs, and in the center of the chaos, 2 bodies. One was living, though barely, Julian Thorne. The disgraced heir lay slumped against the sofa, his eyes rolled back in a drug-induced stupor. His white dress shirt was torn open, splattered with arterial spray. In his limp hand, he loosely gripped a silver letter opener, coated in crimson. The other body was motionless, a young woman, face down, her identity obscured by a curtain of matted, blood-soaked hair. She looked small, fragile, like a broken doll, discarded by a careless child. Evelyn pulled a pair of black latex gloves from her bag and snapped them on. The sound was sharp, cutting through the tension. He did it again. Victoria swirled her wine, looking at her stepson with unmasked disgust. Julian has always been unstable. Tonight, he finally snapped. A lover's quarrel, fueled by heroin and rage. Sad. Really. He won't remember a thing when he wakes up. Evelyn knelt beside Julian, checking his pulse. It was thready. She lifted his eyelid. His pupils were pinpricks. "He's overdosing. If I don't call a paramedic." "You won't need a lawyer for him. You'll need a coroner." Victoria took a step closer, her shadow falling over Evelyn. "Let him die, and you lose your fee. I need him alive." "Evelyn, he needs to be alive to take the fall. Eventually, but for now, this girl needs to disappear. I can't have a murder investigation ruining the merger next week. Make it look like she walked out. A runaway. A disappearance." Evelyn stood up, smoothing her skirt. She looked at the knife in Julian's hand. Then, at the lifeless girl. It was a classic setup. Almost too theatrical. But Evelyn wasn't paid to ask questions. She was paid to scrub floors and silence witnesses. Evelyn opened her bag, retrieving a syringe of adrenaline. "I'll stabilize him. Then I'll deal with the girl. You go to your room. Victoria, lock the door. By sunrise, this room will smell of lemon and lavender, and Julian will be in a private rehab facility." Victoria finished her wine and placed the empty glass on the mantel. "You're a cold woman." "Evelyn, that's why I like you. Don't disappoint me." As the heavy oak doors closed behind Victoria, the penthouse fell silent, save for the storm outside. Evelyn exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. She moved toward the dead girl to begin the grim work of identification and disposal. She reached out, her gloved hand trembling slightly for the first time in years, and brushed the hair away from the victim's face. Evelyn froze. The air left her lungs as if she'd been punched. The face staring back at her with glassy, lifeless eyes wasn't a stranger. It was the face she saw in the mirror every morning. Only younger. Softer. Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking into 1,000 pieces. Mia. The thunder crashed again, shaking the very foundation of the building. But Evelyn couldn't hear it. Her world had just ended. Evelyn Cross felt a scream rising in her throat, a jagged shard of glass threatening to tear her apart from the inside out. It started in her stomach, hot and acidic, climbing up her chest. She wanted to wail, to shake Victoria's locked door until it splintered, to rip the world down around her. But Evelyn did nothing of the sort. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the corner of the ceiling. A tiny red light blinked rhythmically on the motion sensor of the 360-degree security camera. Victoria was watching. The show had to go on. Evelyn forced her breathing to slow, locking the sister inside her into a mental iron box and throwing away the key. Only the fixer remained. She reached down and gently closed Mia's staring eyes with her gloved thumb. Evelyn whispered, barely moving her lips. I'm sorry. Mia, I'm so sorry. I have to erase you to save you. She moved with terrifying efficiency. First, the photos. Evelyn took out her specialized camera and documented the crime scene, not for the police, but for herself. She zoomed in on the bruising around Mia's neck. It wasn't the chaotic, frantic grip of a drug addict like Julian. The bruises were precise, calculated, the work of someone who knew exactly how much pressure to apply to silence a scream without leaving a messy crush injury. Evelyn then turned her attention to Julian. He was still slumped on the floor, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. She uncapped the adrenaline syringe she had prepared earlier and jammed it into his thigh through the fabric of his trousers. Julian gasped, his body arching violently off the floor before crashing back down. His eyes flew open, wide and terrified, swimming in a haze of narcotics and shock. Julian coughed, choking on air. Red. It's all red. Evelyn grabbed his face, digging her fingers into his jaw to force him to look at her. Julian, look at me. Did you touch her? Did you do this? Julian's gaze drifted past Evelyn to the body of Mia. A flicker of recognition, then horror, crossed his face. He tried to scramble backward, but his limbs were like lead. Julian stammered, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. No. She was helping me. The files. She said she had the files. Mother found out. Evelyn froze. Mother. Victoria. Before Evelyn could press him further, Julian's eyes rolled back, and he slumped against the sofa, conscious but paralyzed by the lingering drugs. Evelyn turned back to Mia. She had to move the body before the private cleanup crew, men on Victoria's payroll who asked no questions, arrived to dispose of the trash. As Evelyn lifted Mia's cold hand to place it across her chest, she felt something hard inside Mia's clenched fist. Evelyn pried the stiff fingers open. Resting in Mia's palm was a silver locket, a cheap trinket Evelyn had bought her for her 10th birthday. But the locket was slightly open. Evelyn used a pair of tweezers to pull out a tiny, crumpled piece of paper hidden behind the photo insert. It was a series of numbers. A bank account, a locker code Evelyn didn't know. But she knew Mia had died, protecting it. Evelyn slipped the paper into her bra, close to her beating heart. She then wrapped Mia's body in the heavy plastic sheeting she had brought, sealing it with industrial tape. Every layer of tape felt like she was wrapping it around her own throat. The intercom on the wall buzzed, Victoria's voice cutting through the room like a whip. Evelyn, the transport team is 5 minutes out. Is the package ready? Evelyn stood up, her back straight, her face a mask of stone. She looked at the plastic bundle that contained her entire world. Then, at the camera, Evelyn pressed the talk button, her voice steady, devoid of humanity. The room is clean. Mrs. Thorne. The package is sealed. Send them up. As the elevator gears began to whir, signaling the arrival of the disposal team, Evelyn looked at Julian one last time. He wasn't the killer. He was the witness. And she was the only thing standing between him and a quiet death in a rehab center. The game had changed. She wasn't just cleaning a mess anymore. She was starting a war. 3 days later, the air inside the interrogation room at Sanctuary Hills, an exclusive psychiatric prison masquerading as a rehab center, smelled of antiseptic and despair. One wall was entirely dominated by a massive mirror. Evelyn knew exactly who was standing on the other side. Victoria Thorne's voice crackled through the hidden earpiece in Evelyn's right ear. Make him sign the confession. Evelyn, if he doesn't sign, he doesn't leave this room alive. I'm watching. Evelyn Cross adjusted her silk blazer, her face an impenetrable fortress of calm. She placed a leather folder on the metal table. Opposite her, Julian Thorne was strapped to a heavy steel chair. He looked like a ghost, hollow cheeks, bruises blooming on his jaw, and eyes that darted around the room in paranoid frenzies. They had been keeping him awake for 72 hours. Evelyn sat down, the screech of her chair, leg against the floor, echoing sharply. You look terrible. Julian, the heroin withdrawal must be agony. Julian spat at the table, though his lips were cracked and dry. I didn't kill her. I told you. The files? She was trying to expose the laundering. Evelyn slammed her hand down on the table, the sound like a gunshot. Stop lying. There are no files. There is only a dead girl and a junkie with a knife. You killed her in a hallucinations rage. We have the toxicology report. We have the weapon. Victoria's voice purred in Evelyn's ear. Good. Break him. Remind him he is nothing. Evelyn stood up and circled the table. Prowling like a predator, she leaned over Julian. Her perfume, something sharp and expensive, filling his senses. To the camera behind the mirror, it looked like she was intimidating him. Evelyn hissed, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Your stepmother is the only reason you aren't in a maximum security cell with a murderer twice your size. She loves you. Julian, she wants to help you. Sign the confession. Admit it was an accident. Plead insanity. And you stay here in luxury. Refuse. And you rot in prison. Julian looked up at her, hatred burning in his bloodshot eyes. You're her dog. Evelyn, just a high-priced dog on a leash. Evelyn grabbed Julian by the collar of his hospital gown, yanking him forward until their foreheads almost touched. It was a violent, aggressive move. To the observer, she looked ready to strike him. Evelyn whispered, her voice dropping to a frequency barely audible, masked by the rustle of fabric and Julian's heavy breathing. Listen to me. Don't react. The girl was Mia, my sister. Julian's eyes widened. He opened his mouth to speak, but Evelyn tightened her grip on his collar, choking the words back. Evelyn shouted for the benefit of the microphones. You pathetic waste of space. Sign the damn paper. Underneath the shouting, she continued her desperate whisper. Victoria killed her. I found the code Mia hid. I know you're innocent. But if you don't sign this, Victoria will have you overdosed by morning. You have to trust me. Sign it. Buy me time. Julian searched her eyes. He saw the grief buried deep beneath the ice. He saw the same fire that was burning him. He realized in that split second that the woman holding him captive was his only savior. Julian let out a broken sob, part acting, part genuine relief. He slumped forward, playing the defeated addict. Okay. Give it to me. I'll sign. Evelyn released him, shoving him back into the chair with unnecessary force. She slid the pen across the table. Victoria's voice returned in the earpiece, triumphant. Excellent work. Evelyn, wrap it up. Evelyn watched as Julian's trembling hand signed his life away, admitting to a crime he didn't commit. as he pushed the paper back. His hand brushed hers. He didn't just pass the paper. He pressed a small, hard object into her palm. A cufflink. No. A small data drive disguised as a button. Julian whispered, his voice hoarse. The laundry chute. 3rd floor. Midnight. Get me out. Evelyn snatched the paper and the button. Turning her back to the camera to hide the evidence in her pocket, she walked to the mirror, staring at her own reflection, knowing Victoria was smiling on the other side. Evelyn spoke to the glass. Her reflection, cold and deadly. He's all yours. Mrs. Thorne, the cleanup is complete. But as she walked out, her hand clenched around the button in her pocket so tight, her nails cut into her skin. The cleanup wasn't complete. It was just beginning. The Thorne Foundation Charity Gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers trembled under the bass of a live orchestra, and champagne flowed like water across a sea of diamonds and fake smiles. Evelyn Cross stood on the balcony of the ballroom, the freezing night air biting at her exposed shoulders. She wore a backless crimson gown that looked like a fresh wound against the night sky. In her hand, she clutched a glass of sparkling water, but her focus was on the tablet concealed within her clutch purse. Evelyn tapped the screen, executing the code stored on the button drive Julian had given her. Showtime. 3 miles away. At the Sanctuary Hills facility. The lights flickered and died. Inside the facility, the electronic locks on the maximum security wing disengaged with a heavy thud. The security cameras froze, looping the last 10 seconds of an empty hallway. Evelyn had bought them exactly 12 minutes of blindness. Evelyn slipped away from the party, kicking off her high heels as soon as she reached the service exit. She ran barefoot across the wet gravel towards the waiting black SUV she had parked in the shadows. She wasn't driving to the front door. She was driving to the loading dock. Minutes later, Evelyn stood at the bottom of the laundry chute in the basement of Sanctuary Hills. The smell of industrial bleach and soiled linens was overpowering. She checked her watch. 4 minutes left. Evelyn whispered into the darkness of the metal chute. Julian. Now. A heavy thud echoed, followed by a groan. A body slid out of the chute, landing on a pile of dirty sheets. Julian Thorne looked like a broken angel, his hospital gown torn, his skin gray and clammy. He tried to stand but collapsed, his legs too weak to hold him. Julian gasped, clutching his ribs. You came. I thought you were lying. Evelyn gelt, pulling a black tactical jacket from her bag and throwing it over his shivering shoulders. I don't lie to my partners. Julian, I only lie to everyone else. Can you walk? Before Julian could answer, the heavy steel door of the laundry room burst open. A guard, built like a tank and wielding a stun baton, stepped in. He wasn't part of the regular rotation. He was one of Victoria's private mercenaries. The guard sneered, activating the baton with a crackling electric snap. Going somewhere. Yonkia misses. Thorne said you might try to leave the party early. Julian tried to push Evelyn behind him, staggering forward. Run. Evelyn, get out. Evelyn didn't run. She didn't even flinch. She stood up, the crimson silk of her gown rustling softly. She looked completely out of place in the filthy basement. A queen in a dungeon. Evelyn smiled. And it was the terrifying smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. He's not a junkie anymore, and I'm not just a guest. The guard lunged, swinging the baton at Julian's head. Evelyn moved with a speed that blurred in the dim light. She sidestepped the swing, grabbing the guard's wrist with one hand and jamming a silver pen, the same one she used to sign million-dollar contracts, into the pressure point of his neck with the other. The guard gagged, his eyes bulging, and dropped the baton. Evelyn caught it before it hit the floor. With a fluid, brutal motion, she drove the electrified tip into the guard's chest. He convulsed and collapsed, unconscious before he hit the concrete. Julian stared at her, wide-eyed, forgetting his pain for a moment. Who? Who are you? Really? Evelyn tossed the baton onto the unconscious body and offered Julian her hand. Her nails were painted the same dark red as her dress. Evelyn replied, her voice devoid of adrenaline. Perfectly calm. I'm the fixer, and we are leaving. She hauled him up, supporting his weight as they stumbled toward the service elevator. As the doors closed, the alarm finally began to wail, a shrill, piercing scream that signaled the end of the silent game. Evelyn looked at the display. The cameras were back online. Victoria would see them in 30 seconds. Evelyn pressed the button for the garage. Hold on. Julian, the quiet part is over. Now we make noise. The armored SUV tore out of the Sanctuary Hills garage, its tires screaming in protest against the wet asphalt. Evelyn Cross didn't just drive. She weaponized the vehicle. She slammed the accelerator to the floor, the engine roaring like a dying beast as they smashed through the wooden exit barrier, sending splinters flying into the rainy night. Julian Thorne was thrown against the passenger door. Clutching his bruised ribs, he looked into the side mirror, his face pale as moonlight. They're behind us. 3 black sedans. Victoria's personal guard. Evelyn glanced at the rearview mirror. High-intensity xenon headlights flooded the cabin, blindingly bright. A bullet sparked against the rear windshield, leaving a spiderweb crack in the bulletproof glass. Evelyn gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Let them come. Hold on. She yanked the wheel hard to the left, drifting the heavy SUV onto the highway on-ramp. The pursuit vehicles followed, swarming like sharks. The speedometer climbed 90. eBay. 110 miles per hour. The rain turned the highway into a blurred tunnel of light and danger. Julian shouted over the roar of the engine and the relentless drumming of rain. Why? Why did you risk everything for me? You hated me. You called me a junkie waste. Evelyn swerved to avoid a civilian truck, the maneuver so sharp it threw them both sideways, because Mia didn't die for money. Julian, she died for you. I found the ledger. She was trying to protect your inheritance. Julian's eyes widened. A sudden clarity, cutting through his withdrawal fog. He grabbed Evelyn's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. No, it wasn't the inheritance. That's what Victoria wants you to think. Evelyn momentarily took her eyes off the road to look at him. What? Julian screamed, his voice breaking with the weight of the truth he had been carrying. Mia saw the medicine. My father. He didn't die of a heart attack. Victoria was switching his heart pills with digoxin, slowly poisoning him for months. Mia saw her do it. She saw the bottles. The revelation hit Evelyn harder than the car ramming their bumper from behind. The SUV shuddered violently as one of the pursuers clipped their rear fender, trying to spin them out. Evelyn fought the steering wheel, correcting the skid with a savage twist. Poison. Victoria hadn't just killed Mia. She had murdered the patriarch of the Thorne family to seize control. Mia had walked in on a regicide. Evelyn's voice turned to ice. She killed your father. She killed my sister. And now she wants to bury us. Another impact shook the car, shattering the side mirror. Ahead, the highway split one way leading to the city, the other leading to the unfinished bridge construction over the Hudson River. Evelyn looked at the GPS. It was a dead end, or a new beginning. Evelyn locked eyes with Julian for a split second. Do you trust me? Julian looked at the speedometer, then at the construction signs flashing danger ahead. He didn't flinch. Do it. Evelyn slammed on the brakes and spun the wheel. The SUV didn't take the exit. It smashed through the orange construction barrels, launching off the embankment into the dark void below. For a second, they were weightless. No sound, no rain, just gravity taking hold. Then, the world exploded into water and darkness as the car crashed into the river below, disappearing beneath the churning black waves. leaving the pursuers screeching to a halt on the bridge above, staring down at the ripples. To the world, Evelyn Cross and Julian Thorne were dead, and that was exactly what Evelyn needed them to be. 30 days later, the safe house, a converted loft in a forgotten industrial district of Queens, smelled of stale coffee and burning electronics. The windows were covered with heavy tarps, blocking out the gray city light. Inside, the only illumination came from the glow of 6 computer monitors arranged in a semicircle. Evelyn Cross sat before the screens, her eyes scanning lines of code that scrolled endlessly. Her signature bob was longer now, tied back in a messy bun, and the designer suits were replaced by a simple black turtleneck. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharper than ever. Evelyn tapped a key, freezing the screen. "I've bypassed the encryption on the drive you stole. It's not just a ledger, Julian. It's a diary." In the center of the room, Julian Thorne was doing push-ups. He was shirtless, sweat glistening on his back. The transformation was startling. The gaunt, trembling junkie was gone. In his place was a man of lean muscle and terrifying focus. He had detoxed cold turkey in this room a week of screaming hell that Evelyn had watched with unwavering stoicism. Julian stood up, grabbing a towel. He walked over to the screens, his movement fluid and steady. "Does it prove she bought the digoxin?" Evelyn pointed to a highlighted entry. "Better. It proves she was slowly increasing the dosage. And here, a transfer of $2 million to the coroner who ruled your father's death, a heart attack. We have the weapon. Julian, now we just need the battlefield." Julian walked to the corner of the room where a garment bag hung. He unzipped it, revealing a bespoke black tuxedo. It was the armor of his former life, the skin of the prince he was supposed to be. Julian ran his hand over the fabric. "Tomorrow is the memorial service. She's declaring me legally dead in absentia. Once the gavel bangs, she gets full control of Thorne Enterprises. She's going to announce the dismantling of the company." Evelyn stood up and walked toward him. She reached out and adjusted the collar of the shirt hanging in the bag. For a moment, the distance between them vanished. They were 2 ghosts who had clawed their way back from the underworld. Evelyn whispered, "If we walk into that hall, there is no coming back. If we fail, she won't just kill us. She'll make it hurt. She'll destroy our names before she stops our hearts." Julian turned to face her. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, a gesture so tender it felt dangerous in the cold room. His eyes, once cloudy with drugs, were now burning with a cold, blue fire. Julian replied, his voice low and resonant, "Let her try. I'm not the boy she broke anymore. And you're not the employee she bought. We are the consequences of her actions." He turned to the table where Evelyn had laid out her own gear, not a gun, but a high-tech earpiece and a tablet connected to the venue's audiovisual system. Evelyn picked up the earpiece, a faint, cruel smile touching her lips. "The memorial starts at noon. The press will be there. The board of directors will be there. She wants a show. Let's give her the performance of a lifetime." Julian pulled on the white dress shirt, buttoning it over the scars on his chest. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, a dead man walking, ready to reclaim his throne. Julian buttoned his cuffs. "The Phoenix Protocol is active. Let's go burn her kingdom down." Outside, the rain began to fall again, washing away the grime of the city, preparing the streets for the war to come. The grand ballroom of the Thorne Tower had been transformed into a cathedral of hypocritical mourning. 3,000 white lilies suffocated the air with their cloying scent. A 20-foot portrait of Julian Thorne, draped in black silk, loomed over the stage where the elite of New York sat in respectful silence. Victoria Thorne stood at the podium, looking like a tragic queen in her Givenchy mourning dress. She paused, letting a single, perfectly practiced tear slide down her cheek. The cameras flashed, capturing her grief for the morning papers. Victoria lowered her head, her voice trembling with manufactured sorrow. "My stepson fought his demons for years. In the end, they won. It breaks my heart to declare him lost. But for the sake of this company, for the legacy my husband built, I must accept the burden of leadership. I hereby sign the transfer of power." She reached for the gold pen, the pen that would sign away the empire. Boom. The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open, they were thrown wide with enough force to crack the plaster. A gust of wind from the stormy street outside swept through the room, extinguishing the ceremonial candles. Silence, sudden and absolute, fell over the crowd. 500 heads turned in unison. Julian Thorne stood in the doorway. He wasn't the disheveled addict the world remembered. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like armor. His hair slicked back, his posture radiating a terrifying, icy calm. He looked like a king returning from war. Julian's voice projected across the silent hall without a microphone. Clear and cold. "Put the pen down. Victoria, you've forged enough signatures for one lifetime." Victoria dropped the pen, her face drained of color, leaving her makeup standing out like a grotesque mask. She gripped the podium, her knuckles white. "Security, remove him. It's an imposter. He's dead." The security guards moved. But before they could take a step, the giant screen behind Victoria, the one displaying Julian's memorial photo, glitched violently. Static tore through the image, followed by a high-pitched screech of audio feedback. Evelyn Cross's voice, amplified by the stadium-grade speakers, thundered from everywhere and nowhere. "Nobody moves. The show is just starting." On the screen, the memorial photo vanished. In its place, a series of documents appeared: bank transfers, chemical purchase orders, and finally, a grainy video clip taken from a hidden camera inside the Thorne Library months ago. The video showed Victoria mixing a white powder into a glass of scotch. Victoria screamed, waving her hands at the screen. "Turn it off. Cut the power." But the video continued. The audio on the screen played a conversation, recorded by the very device Mia had died to protect. Voice of Victoria on screen. 2 milligrams of digoxin a day, just enough to mimic heart failure. By the time the autopsy happens, the tissue will be clean. And if the girl saw anything, well, accidents happen to maids too. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The press went feral. Flashes erupted like a strobe light storm, blinding Victoria on stage. Evelyn emerged from the shadows of the stage wings. She held a tablet in one hand and a microphone in the other. She walked past the stunned board members, straight to Victoria. Evelyn spoke, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "It wasn't an accident. Victoria, it was a liquidation, and you missed 2 loose ends." Victoria lunged at Evelyn, her composure shattering into primal rage. "You filthy little fixer, I paid you to clean this up." Julian was there in a heartbeat. He caught Victoria's wrist mid-air, stopping her strike inches from Evelyn's face. He didn't twist it, he just held it, staring down at the woman who had tormented him for decades. Julian whispered, low enough that only the 3 of them could hear. "You didn't pay her enough to sell her soul. And you didn't kill me enough to keep me down." The sirens wailing outside weren't for a fire. They were the police, called by Evelyn 10 minutes ago. Julian released Victoria's wrist with a shove. She stumbled back, collapsing against the podium, looking out at the sea of faces that had turned from adoration to disgust. The empire she had killed for was dissolving before her eyes. Evelyn looked at Julian. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at her. In the middle of the flashing lights and the shouting reporters, they shared a silent nod. The war was won. Now came the execution. The flashing red and blue lights of the NYPD cruisers painted the rain-slicked streets outside Thorne Tower in chaotic strokes of color. Victoria Thorne didn't scream as they handcuffed her. She didn't struggle. She maintained her icy composure until the very end. treating the arresting officers like chauffeur staff. As they led her past the heavy glass doors, she paused. Julian and Evelyn stood side by side under the awning, shielded from the drizzle. Victoria locked eyes with her stepson one last time. Victoria snared, her voice dripping with venom even in defeat. "You think you've won? Julian, you're a broken thing. You'll run this company into the ground within a year." Julian stepped forward, his hands casually in his pockets, looking at her not with fear, but with pity. "I might be broken, Victoria, but unlike you, I don't have to kill to feel whole. Enjoy the cell. I hear the view is terrible." The police car door slammed shut, severing Victoria from the world she once ruled. Julian watched the car disappear into the Manhattan traffic, then let out a long, shuddering breath. It was over. The poison was gone. 6 weeks later, the autumn wind swept through the quiet avenues of the Greenwood Cemetery, rustling the golden leaves. Evelyn Cross knelt on the damp grass, placing a single white rose on the fresh granite headstone. It read simply, "Mia Cross." She knew the truth. Evelyn traced the letters with her fingers. For the first time in months, the heavy weight in her chest felt lighter. She wasn't the fixer here. She was just a sister who had kept her promise. Evelyn whispered to the cold stone, "It's done. Mia, they know what you did. You didn't die in vain." Footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind her. Evelyn didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She recognized the rhythm of his stride, steady, confident, no longer dragging. Julian Thorne stopped beside her, respecting the silence. He wore a dark gray wool coat, looking every inch the CEO of a reformed empire. He didn't bring flowers. He brought a folder. Julian spoke softly, looking at the grave. "The board voted this morning. We're liquidating the pharmaceutical division. We're donating the profits to addiction recovery centers in Mia's name. It's not enough, but it's a start." Evelyn stood up, brushing the dirt from her knees. She looked at the skyline in the distance. "It's a good start. Julian, you're going to be a decent king." Julian turned to her, his expression serious. "I don't need a king. I need a partner. The company is a mess of corruption left behind by Victoria. There are skeletons in every closet. Bad contracts. Hidden debts." He held out the folder to her. It was an employment contract, but the title wasn't crisis manager. It was chief strategy officer. Julian continued, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "I don't need someone to bury the bodies anymore. Evelyn, I need someone to help me dig them up and clean the house properly. I need the fixer, but this time, on the side of the angels." Evelyn looked at the contract, then up at Julian's blue eyes. The darkness that had bound them together, the drugs, the murder. The lies had forged something unbreakable. They were two survivors standing on the wreckage of the past. Evelyn took the folder. She didn't smile, but her eyes were warm. "I don't come cheap. Mr. Thorne." Julian offered her his arm. "I'm counting on it. Ms. Cross." They walked away from the grave together, leaving the dead to rest and stepping into a world that was still messy, still dangerous, but finally theirs to shape.